I both love and hate that my male partner, is a dominant masculine man. In this video, I'm going to share with you why that's the case, what it means to be a dominant and masculine man. Obviously, I don't have lived experience with that, but I'll share with you through the lens of what it's like to experience that as a woman who also considers herself someone with a lot of masculine energy. In my past life, if you will, when I lived in New York City and worked in the corporate world, I had a lot of dominant energy. I had a lot of really effective leadership skills. I could command a room. I could go in and give direction and have a clear vision. And these are all attributes of the masculine or masculine energy. And just note for a moment that when I say masculine, I don't mean men. Masculine is an energy or an attribute or characteristics that we can embody no matter what our biological sex is or what our gender identification is. And in fact, all beings have masculine and feminine energy. Today, we're mostly going to talk about masculine energy and dominant energy. I'm also going to share a story with you about how being in a relationship with a dominant masculine man has been so transformative for me. I'm going to share the pros and cons to being with a dominant masculine man and then my takeaways. So, I want to start by sharing a story, and this is going to capture perfectly why I love and hate at the same time that my male partner is a dominant masculine man. So just a couple days ago, he and I, it was like midnight, we were chatting on the couch and we were having a breakthrough conversation, which is very normal for us to talk about where we're at in life, what we're seeing for ourselves, what we perceive our roadblocks to be, where we're getting in our own way, what new habits and behaviors we'd like to cultivate to be able to live our dream life as individuals and as a couple. And in this conversation, he was asking me questions about some of my patterns that he's seen in me, the patterns where I get in my own way or where there are self sabotaging behaviors, where I'm not really taking a stand for what I want and living into my vision. And we've had these conversations many times. And let's just say for the past 5 years that we've been together, a lot of them have ended up in me being highly triggered, highly inflamed and activated emotionally because I came into this relationship and spent most of my life carrying a narrative that I'm not enough. So then, when someone says something that I use to make mean, oh, look, see, I'm not enough, that's when a trigger happens. And that's when triggers happen for most of us. It's typically when someone says or does something that confirms a subconscious belief that we have about ourselves. That's one of the main reasons why people can tend to feel triggered. So when I felt triggered as he was asking me these questions about patterns that he has seen me play out that are keeping me from having and living the life that I say that I want, I felt saturated and overwhelmed. And I abruptly ended the conversation. I said, I'm complete. I'm good. I've had an insight. I'm done. And this opened up a bit of a tiff between us. And what he had shared with me the next morning is he was like, you could have shared that so differently. You could have taken the opportunity to be vulnerable, to reveal that something felt hard for you, to share that you felt triggered and activated, and that your mind was going to make meaning of it and say that you're not good enough. You could have actually used it as an opportunity to create intimacy and connection as opposed to walling off and pushing away. And in that moment, I got even more triggered because what my ego wanted more than anything, was to make all of this his fault. He said the wrong thing, he said it in the wrong way, he didn't honor my boundary, etc. I had a whole list of reasons why this wasn't my fault and why I couldn't help it and how I was the victim here. And he called me out on that again. He said, "Look at your language. You are relinquishing responsibility for your own experience." And this has been a pattern that I learned very early on in childhood, watching my parents' dynamic, and a pattern that's very deeply sewn into the fabric of a lot of the feminine and many women. which is this pattern of victimhood. Now, I'm not saying that all women act like victims or take on victim consciousness, but there is something about victim consciousness that is generally more present in women than it is in men. So he is sharing that, in this situation, he was like, look at your language. You're not taking responsibility. Here's what you could say. And he called me forth into this. One of my patterns has been to not take full responsibility for how I contribute to any circumstances in my life, much less conflict and rupture in the relationship. And then when things get hard, one of my patterns is to pull away and leave. So there's a bit of an avoidant tendency there. And here's what changed everything, because I was running the same loop. I was about to play out the same pattern, walk away, leave his place with my tail tucked between my legs to go and lick my wounds in isolation. Because being in isolation feels very familiar for me because I spent a lot of time alone as a child. I was an only child, still am. And so being alone is what sometimes feels safe and familiar to my nervous system. So instead of letting me walk away, he called me back. He came out to the garage as I was leaving and he said, come here. He took me out to the park by his place. We sat in the sun, we talked, and I started opening up because he provided a space for me to do that. He wasn't moving in to criticize or attack or nitpick, but he held a space for me. And what comes up for me in these moments when I perceive that I have done something wrong or that I've been a bad girl, as it were, but then I get love anyway because he is taking a stand for being unwavering presence and being unconditional love. What comes up for me is shame. And this is all happening in the back of my mind and in my body. So now here I am sitting in this shame that I've quote unquote fucked up, and he still loves me. Why is he still here? Why didn't he let me leave? I should be alone right now. He called me back. We went back into his place and he sat me on his lap. And in that moment, I just started breaking down into tears. He wrapped his arms around me. I was straddled on top of him on the couch. And in that moment, it felt like I had regressed back to infancy. Like I had awareness that I was still an adult woman sitting on my adult partner's lap, but some part of my consciousness regressed back to infancy. And instinctively, I felt called to tuck my arms into my body and curl into him as he held me. And he sat there and he just pounded on my back like this, the way you would do to a baby. And it's, if you've never had this done to you as an adult, on your chest or on your upper back, it's so soothing. So he sat there and he patted my back. Now, both my partner and I are psychedelic therapists. So we're very well trained in developmental psychology, in regression, in attachment wounding and attachment theory, and many other things. So he immediately knew what was happening. So he continued to nurture me like I was an infant. And tears are pouring out of my eyes, and I'm hearing the sound of my cry. And it sounds like the cry of a baby. Now, when I cry as an adult woman, it does not sound the way it sounded the other day. My cry as an adult woman sounds like an adult woman is crying. This cry, the cadence, the pitch, the repetition, the breathing pattern was that of an infant. And so I allowed this cry to happen. I knew I was regressed. He knew I was regressed. And here I was in his arms, reliving parts of my infancy and parts of my childhood that I never got to process when I didn't get the love and nurturance from my mother that I really needed, when I didn't get the soothing and the connection with her that I really needed because I was passed around a lot as a child because both of my parents traveled for work. So I didn't have her care and nurturance. And so in that moment, he's patting me on the back. And then he says this Hawaiian prayer, a ho'oponopono prayer. And it's, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And as soon as he said that, I started bawling even more because I could feel that he was saying this to me on behalf of my own mother, who in this lifetime probably won't have the capacity to say those words to me. So he was saying this, and simultaneously, I knew that it was him, but it also felt like my mother. So there was this weird psychedelic thing that was happening. I was completely sober, and I'm sitting there, and my nose is completely stuffed. I cannot smell a thing, I cannot breathe through it. Yet I can smell his pheromones. And it was like this extra sense that was happening. I have no idea how to explain it. And it was his pheromones, but it was also my mother's, all in this one experience. Now, mind you, I had the consciousness that this is my partner. He's a man. He's not my mother. But some other part of my psyche was going through this regressive experience that I can only imagine was to heal traumatic trauma that I didn't ever get to resolve because I was an infant and I didn't have the capacity or the know-how to do that. And so he continued to say this prayer. And then he said, "You don't have to leave anymore. You're safe here." And he said, "You don't have to leave because, again, I was always needing to leave my home. I got passed around to family members in very formative years of my life because neither of my parents was there to care for me. So I was constantly moving, constantly, almost on a weekly basis from one family member's house to another. And so he was creating this reparative space for me to heal through this. He checked in the next day with me, and the next day I felt really depressed. And he said, "You know, what's possible is happening is that whatever you released yesterday really gave you space to feel the deep existential loneliness and aloneness that you often avoid feeling, that you cover up through work, through technology, through food, through friends, whatever it is." That in that regressive experience where I was bawling my eyes out, I got to like slough off the dead skin that was sitting on top of the real pain that's sitting underneath. And I opened myself to a new layer of my human emotional experience. And throughout that day, I just couldn't help but notice how naked and exposed I felt, just like raw, ripped open. And so I share this story because this is the perfect depiction of how a dominant masculine partner can show up for his partner. Now, I'm not saying that this is always how it needs to be, but this is one example of the kind of repair and healing and transformation and transcendence that can happen in a relationship where there is such a deep level of safety, where there's such a deep level of containment, where there is love and nurturance. There's so much that's possible. And his and my belief is that most of our healing through traumatic experiences happens in relationship because most of the trauma that we experience in our life is in relation to another person. So I'm I'm a few days out from this experience now, and there is an integration that's happening where I feel so much more adult. I feel this urge and this urgency to care for myself and my inner little girl, my inner child, in a way that I didn't feel like I had access to before. I was kind of callous and numb, and I pushed myself. And now there's this layer of vulnerability and sensitivity that I have access to for myself that is no doubt going to serve me in bringing my dreams to fruition. You know, often we think that bringing our dreams to fruition is just about planning our miracle morning or just about setting goals and reaching goals. And, you know, that's all a part of it. But a huge part of actualizing as humans is also doing this level of inner work where we get access to our deepest depths, the wells of our emotions and darkness and shadows. And that's how we access the height and the expansiveness of our light, as above, so below, as the saying goes. So I want to talk for a moment about what was significant about how my partner showed up and how I'm defining masculinity and dominance, or masculine energy and dominant energy. Now, let me start by saying that this is not the only way to define masculine energy or dominant energy, but I'm going to give you a few pointers here, a few definitions that will help us start to form a picture of what this energy is. So here is what my partner is just wildly proficient and fluent with. And these are cornerstones of both masculine energy and dominant energy. And by the way, when I say dominant, I'm not talking about a BDS bondage scene. Although you can take these definitions and bring them into the bedroom or into kink and play, I'm talking about the energy of masculine energy and dominant energy in the context of a romantic relationship in everyday life. So the first one here is that he sets the vision and direction for our relationship and our lives, and he has sight, meaning he has an ability to see. I'm pointing at my third eye here, which is like our intuitive sight, a sight beyond our visual sight. My partner has a vision. He has a vision that is like for the rest of our lifetime. 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 60, 70 years out into the legacy that we leave here on this earth. That's not always something I think about all the time. He has this beautiful vision. He sets the direction for that. He helps in many ways keep us accountable to fulfilling that vision. And he has a sight beyond the sight that I have. Now, if we think about this from an evolutionary perspective, when male hunters were out, in the caveman era, they had to have sight. They're standing upright. They are looking long distances for prey. They're looking for lions and, I don't know, woolly mammoths, maybe. But they're upright and they are looking. So their vision and their sight goes very long distances. Women were the foragers and gatherers. So often we're looking down at what's right here, right now, what is right in front of us, what needs to happen right now, how do we care for the children right now, what's happening in the household right now. And by no means am I trying to make this, uh, a conversation where women are the only ones caring for the household. But if we go back to that time, that was the role of the woman. She was gathering berries and twigs and leaves and vegetation for the tribe. So our sight is very different. And I don't know how much has really evolved, how much we have really evolved since then, but our brains are still wired in a very similar way. So my partner holds this sight and vision. He holds the frame. When I say the frame, it means that he sets the energetic tone for our relationship, whereas I set the emotional tone. So when I say energetic tone, it's he wakes up each day, he has a vision, he has direction, and he holds the frame essentially through his energy. He says, this is how it's going to be. Hop on or hop off. Like the train's going this way. I want you on the train with me, but we are going this way. We will not be pulled back. When someone walks into a room and they're holding the frame psychologically or emotionally, right? Think of politicians. They hold the frame all the time. They're telling you what's happening. They're telling you what's going to happen. Not always true. Most of the time isn't, but often people in leadership hold the frame because there is a level of confidence and assuredness that they hold in their posture, in their tone, in their energy, in their way of being, where it's like, oh, they seem like they know what they're doing, so we're going to follow this person. That's what I mean by holding the frame. And when somebody has the frame, we entrain to them. We follow their flow. We're like, okay, somebody's got to be the leader. This person looks like they know where they're going. I'm going to follow them. So my partner holds the frame. I often entrain to him. And I like it that way because he has a vision. He has direction and sight. He gives the commands. He says, okay, here's what we're doing. Here's how it's going to be. Now, let me say that sometimes this doesn't happen without a little pushback, poking, prodding, testing, fighting from me. And in the 5 years that we've been together, he has proven himself time and time and time again that he will not lead us in the wrong direction. So when I can tame my ego a bit, I know that in training to him is actually a really good thing for me to do. It's healthy for me to do because he's taking us to a place that I also want to go, because my vision for myself is a part of his vision for us. He also creates the container, meaning that he sets the space. And this is more of an energetic thing than, a physical thing, but I'm using a gesture of, creating a space with my arms. He creates the container. So what he did for me in this situation where I was regressed was he created a space for me, a container. He contained me. He literally contained me with his arms, but he also contained my energy. He contained my emotions. He didn't constrict them, push them down, try to make them different. He held me so that I wasn't just floating off into the ethers. That's what causes us to feel safe. As humans, we desire and crave containment. Infants, children, adolescents, they crave containment, which is why healthy boundaries feel good for us. They cause us to feel safe. So he created the container for me. Now, as a masculine dominant partner, he also provides direct, honest reflection. I will tell you, he does not bullshit. When he's got something to say, he says it. And sometimes it's very piercing and penetrating. It's always true. It's not always what I want to hear, but he has a penetrative force. When we think of the anatomy of men, they are the penetrators. They use their phallus or penis to penetrate. And when we think of the anatomy of women, they are the receivers, which is why we have a vaginal canal to receive, to be penetrated. So beyond the act of intercourse, there are emotional, energetic, spiritual implications to masculine and feminine energy, to our anatomy, to how we naturally show up in, for most of us, our most natural instinctive essence. And what I mean by that, when I say that, is that, and again, I'm going to make a broad generalization. For most women, it is in our nature to receive, to be penetrated. For most men, it is in their nature to penetrate, to see, to cut through things. And so when we operate in what is our natural essence for most of us, now some humans may not actually feel this way, and they are the outliers and awesomely unique all in their own right. But for the vast majority of us, as women, we want to be penetrated. Now, our ego doesn't want to be penetrated, seen, or called forth, but our heart, our soul as women wants to be penetrated. So he plays that role as a masculine dominant partner. He's also unwavering in his presence. Think of like a lighthouse. No matter how stormy it gets, how much I push or test, he's not going anywhere. He's unwavering. He's not bending. He's not folding. He's calling my bluff. I mean, when I say that this guy is like the best poker player, metaphorically speaking, he's the best poker player. He does not fold. He does not waver. He calls me on my bluffs. He has an unwavering presence. And while my ego detests this, it just utterly loathes it. My heart, my inner child, the woman that I am loves and feels safe and trusts him because he's unwavering. He does not compromise on his values. He does not compromise when there isn't a good reason to compromise. And with all of that being said, he also embodies a beautiful feminine energy. Just like the yin and yang symbol, in the black part of the yin and yang, there is a little bit of white. And in the white part of the yin and yang, there's a little bit of black. This is akin to saying that in all of us, we have masculine and feminine energy, and we need a balance. Because one without the other, we start operating in unconscious, shadow-like, harmful ways. So in that story that I shared, him holding me and nurturing me was his feminine energy. Him soothing me was his feminine energy. And because he has so much of his feminine energy integrated into him, it allows his masculine energy to, like, he really shows up with a sense of confidence and mission and purpose and valor. And it's because he also has a lot of feminine energy. And that, just in short, is the energy of unconditional love, nurturance, intuition, non-linearity, flow, heart-centeredness. I mean, there's a lot I can say about the feminine, but we need both. So let me talk about the pros and cons of being with a dominant masculine man as a modern day woman who has considered herself to be hyper independent in many ways, can do it on my own, don't need a man, blah, 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 blah. Right. I'm really coming off my soapbox with that way of being, which is what I learned from many of the women in my family and from many women in society, because in my opinion, we've been brainwashed into this hyper masculinity that doesn't actually feel good for most of us. Doesn't mean we can't have ambitions and fucking go slay it in an office and be a CEO and wear a red power suit. Fuck yeah, we can. But there is also a softness and a vulnerability and a revealing of our hearts that we crave as women. And if all of the boss babe power and ambition goes without the softness, then we really become disconnected from our essence as women. So here are the pros to being in a relationship with a dominant masculine man. One, I feel safe and secure through and through. Yes, financially, but really emotionally, energetically, spiritually, sexually. I feel safe to be seen. I feel safe to be vulnerable. I feel safe to reveal myself, to reveal my heart, the parts, the deepest, darkest, gnarliest parts of me, because he creates a container. He contains me. He has a vision. He's taking us in that direction. And I get to rewrite all of the old narratives I have about love, because every single day, through how he shows up, he is showing me that despite all of the things I believed about not being worthy, not being enough, being too much, carrying all the shame that I've carried all my life, thinking that I need to work hard and prove myself to earn love, and on, the narratives that so many of us carry, he has shown me that all of that is just categorically false. That I don't have to earn love or work hard for it, that I'm inherently worthy, and that even if I make a mistake or step out of integrity with myself or with us, that his love is unconditional, that he's going to show up for me no matter what. That is just like, oh, it's the greatest gift of life. And I honestly, I'm so grateful that while I'm sitting here with you, I'm getting to really feel this, because in the day to day, I don't always slow down to feel this. But gosh, what a gift it is to be loved so unconditionally and so generously by another human. So, on that note, here are the cons. And these are only cons for my ego. These are not actual cons in real life. One con to being with a dominant masculine man who has vision, who has sight, who knows how to contain, who has leadership abilities and actually exercises them for the better, for good, is that I get called out of my bullshit. I get called forth. He does not let me get away with nothing. And let me tell you, one of the things that I learned growing up because of some of the trauma that my mother experienced was how to pull a fast one, how to get away with things. That is what I witnessed a lot in her. And so I took that on as well. And I cannot pull a fast one on him. And while my ego hates that, I feel safe because I can't. Because if I could get away with my bullshit with him, I wouldn't trust him. I'd be like, oh, this guy, he doesn't see me. He doesn't see what I'm doing. He's not looking. He's not paying attention. He does not let me get away with shit. And he's teaching me how to hold myself to that same level of accountability, not because I need to punish myself, but because I get to and am worthy of actualizing my full potential and living into my full potential. That is the definition of self-love and self-worth and self-value. Is like, do I think I'm capable of that? Well, then I'm going to fucking try, because that would feel good for me. Now, another con is that sometimes, at least right now in this process, while I'm rewiring a lot that gut, that got wired in a faulty way in childhood through traumatic experiences is that love feels very confusing. A lot of my wires feel as if they're crossed, right? I had this idea that love was conditional, that I needed to earn it, that I needed to perform, and he's showing me that's not the case. So often when he shows up in that way to negate the narrative and the emotional and nervous system state that has been sitting in my body for 30 plus years, I'm like, I'm kind of confused. All of this is ultimately great because now I am getting to rewire my nervous system, rewire my brain to open up to what love actually is, which is truth. Love isn't always this sweet, gentle thing. Love can pierce and cut when it is cutting away at narratives that we've held about ourselves that aren't true, narratives of unworthiness and not enoughness. And I can go on about that, but I'll save that for another video. And like I said, he's the all-seeing eye. Him being the all-seeing eye, not a good thing for my ego. Because again, I can't get away with any of the bullshit that I was trying to get away with, that my ego was trying to get away with. And again, this causes me to trust him. And so truly there aren't any cons for my ego, but my ego, more and more of what has been operating in the shadows is coming to light through his sight and vision. And I am learning to have a sense of sight and vision for myself. So my takeaways in this experience that I shared about in the beginning of this video, and in this chapter of my life in love and relationships and dating as a woman who's in a relationship, as a woman who leads dating, love, and relationship work for women and couples, is that I am safe. I am safe to be here. I am safe to be me. I am safe to be in my body and to feel my emotions. I am wanted and I am loved. And if any of these resonate for you, please take them and repeat them as often as possible. In the morning, in bed, at night, in bed, in the shower, while you're brushing your teeth, while you're making your breakfast, while you're on your run, while you're on your drive to work, whatever it is, I am safe to be here. I am safe to be me. I am safe to be in my body. I am wanted and I am loved. That's what I got for you today. If this resonated for you, please like this video, leave a comment, tell me what resonated most, share this video out with whoever you think could benefit from hearing this message. Because let me tell you, we are in the midst of a revolution, which is why the world seems batshit crazy right now. All of the old structures, old ways of being, old ways of loving and dating and doing relationships are falling away, and it feels painful. We're literally teething right now. It's like we're teething, we're going through puberty, it's awkward, it's weird, it's painful. We don't want to talk to anybody about it. Like, it's all the things. We smell, who knows? But we're in the midst of a revolution right now. And it's going to take leaders like you and me. And I know you're a leader because you're here, you're watching this video, you got to the end. That means you're a leader. You're allowing yourself to be transformed and impressed upon by this, if it feels right for you to do so. We're in the midst of a revolution, and the only way to really evolve into a new paradigm of operation where we are actually embodying the love that we are as humans, and we are being done with the war and the hate and all of the things that we've been perpetuating, is for this message to get out. So if there's someone you feel should see this video, please share it with them. Comment below, like, subscribe. I am so excited to hear from you. And if you want to send me a DM, then connect with me on Instagram at @lenoto_. And below this video in the show notes, if you're interested in taking this work any deeper and working with me or working with my partner and I, then there's a bunch of links below this video for how you can do that. All right, I'm sending you so much love and good vibes today. Thanks for sticking around to the end.